And good morning. It is time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And now your host, Mike Hewitt. Now, did you get wet getting in here this morning, Mike?
Listen, I had first off, yes, I did, but I had almost a bigger catastrophe than that. I was trying to do too much this morning, carrying, one of those look like Jerry Lewis things where I've got 18 items and I should have only been trying to carry 3. Mm-hmm. I dropped the coffee silo.
Oh.
A full cup, but I could live without the coffee. But I thought, I almost was going to wear the coffee.
Right.
But the bigger crisis was, what would have happened if the coffee silo broke?
Because it is ceramic, right?
Yeah. We're talking crisis level. So
I think we've been playing a replay because you'd have been crying at home.
Nice. Listen, good morning, everybody. We've got Ludwig von Wiedem-Dorsky, who says, are we streaming again?
Yes, we are.
Not screaming, streaming. I was screaming earlier when I dropped the silo. Miles Bauer from the great state of Illinois. And our guest this morning is Merrill Matthews, who is a resident scholar with the Institute for Policy Innovation in Dallas, Texas. Merrill Matthews, welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Well, thank you for having me, Mike.
Hey, it's got to be really early in the morning in Dallas, Texas, right?
Well, it's just after 8 o'clock, so it's not bad.
Okay, I was thinking you were 3 hours behind us. So it's 9:00 something right now here in Michigan.
Yeah, we're on Central Time, so we're just an hour behind you. Though some people think Texas is years behind other places.
See, now I'm the other way around. I think Texas is way out in front of the rest of the Union
being
of States.
a native Texan, I would agree with you there.
You guys still have a little bit of the Constitution left out there in your state.
We've been trying to preserve it, but there's not much of it left.
No, it's getting rougher all the time. Listen, tell us a little bit, if I could get you, Merrill. Tell us what is the Institute for Policy Innovation.
Well, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan research institute, commonly called a think tank, started in 1987, and we work on a range of different public policy issues, whether you're talking about tax, health policy, welfare, energy issues. So we just cover a number of different public policy areas where we publish various things. People can go to our website at ipi.org. Everything is made available free for anybody to use and consume and share.
Listen, one of the things I'm especially excited to have you on the show to discuss is the EPA, who is known by far and large as the great friend of the consumer and citizen in America. They're doing some wonderful things to make fuel more affordable for the average family in America coming up. Is that right?
Well, yes. What happened is in 2007, Congress passed legislation called the Energy Independence and Security Act. And what they wanted to do was they were concerned that there was a growing dependence on foreign oil that might posed a threat to our security, and the thinking at the time was that ethanol, mostly corn-based ethanol, but increasingly what they call advanced biofuels, would be if we could substitute some of that into the gasoline, it would reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and then ethanol would be more environmentally friendly, and so that would be sort of a win-win. So they passed legislation requiring refiners to put some of that ethanol into the gas. So most of us, when we're driving, we have about a 10% blend of ethanol in our gas tanks. What's happened is that the EPA, that legislation required the EPA to come back every 3 years and re-look at that and say, are the assumptions that we had still functional? Are they still right? It did a reassessment in 2012. It was supposed to do another one. I think last year it didn't do it. It's now the Inspector General of the EPA has come out and said we're out of compliance. We're not abiding by the law, and so the EPA has come up and said they'll try to do it in 2017. The problem is that those initial assumptions just really aren't valid anymore. We've got all kinds of oil and natural gas out there. We're the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas now, and so the notion that we need this to protect us from, so that we're not having to greater dependence on foreign oil is no longer valid. And increasingly, there's this concern that creating ethanol creates more problems than it actually solves, because it takes a lot of carbon emissions to actually create ethanol, and you put so much pressure on the price of corn that it drives up the price of corn. And so even some environmentalists are coming back and saying, we don't really actually support that mandate anymore, because ethanol is not the environmental benefit that we thought it was going to be.
It feels like, of course, I'm a layman, so I mean, state that up front, but when I look at across the fruited plain at things like food, of course, the president says we have no inflation. I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but most of what I believe is hard inflation is driven by policy. And you've talked about law several times, but listen and tell me if I'm wrong here. But when I look at the EPA, I look at actually unrepresented policy, not legislative law, that they seem to really use to beat up the citizen with. I don't know where they get the authority that they use, at least in how it is that they engage some of these policies of theirs. Am I being shrill?
Well, no, you're not. In fact, of course, I actually penned a piece with the governor, the Attorney General of Oklahoma a little while back, looking at the number of state lawsuits filed against the federal government, and especially the EPA, on all the mandates that the EPA is imposing on states. Because as you sort of allude to, the EPA seems to come up and think it has all kinds of authority to do various things and impose various mandates on the states. And it's not unusual for a state to sue the federal government. It's unusual for multiple states, and many times, in this case, more than half the states, to sue the federal government over various things. Most of those are EPA overreach, and the states haven't been successful in all of them, but they've been successful in a number of those efforts.
Well, some of it seems to be a question of what it is that we identify the proper role of government with, but then more specifically, the proper role of the executive branch, which I've always interpreted as being the person that sits in that chair along with his administration are there to enforce and enact what laws Congress direct to them. And it feels often like the president, by the way, regardless of which party or who sits in that chair, but it feels like the president rather has taken that role and stretched it out really, really big. And what's more alarming is that the folks don't seem to react to it.
See, I agree with you completely. You could certainly see elements of that in George W. Bush, to some extent in Bill Clinton, but I think President Obama has gone far and above what his predecessors have done in terms of stretching that. And part of this, Congress has been willing to do that in the Affordable Care Act. That is what we call Obamacare. They had, in that 2,700-page legislation, they had something like 3,000 references to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the person who oversees all of this, and they gave, it was just filled with comments like, the Secretary shall decide, the Secretary shall determine, the Secretary shall impose fines, the Secretary shall make the rules, and on and on and on. So in essence, Congress, and of course that was all Democrats that vote for that, essentially handed over a lot of the power to the agencies to make and determine a lot of these various aspects, because there's so many fingers that go out, tentacles that go out. Congress couldn't try to anticipate every action, so they just give the agencies an awful lot of power, and then those agencies in many cases then start trying to grasp even more power.
To me, it's to a political end.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, Miles, go ahead.
Let's not forget that the Supreme Court even dodged their responsibilities when they didn't shoot down the tax part of the Affordable Health Care Act. So let's not just point at Congress. Let's also remember that the courts dodged their very responsibility.
They
absolutely, that's absolutely right.
Yep, they had an opportunity to point at the Constitution and instead said no. And you're right, Miles, both branches of government in that regard, both the judiciary and everyone that listens to the show knows how fond I am of them, along with Congress, both defaulted to the executive branch. And that's fearsome. We've seen a lot of countries where that hasn't worked out so well.
That's right, and it would be interesting because that happened back in 2012, I believe it was, the first ruling on that, and had John Roberts, the Chief Justice, not been willing to do that, it may have pushed the administration to pull back a little bit from some of its overreach. But by giving the administration that sort of momentum, I think it encouraged the administration to go on and say, look, we got the courts with us. We can do not just on health care, but we can do a number of things out there, and we think we'll be able to persuade the courts to follow us.
You know what? I absolutely agree with that, and I think this is one of the scariest parts of a Hillary administration, because she can appoint that vacant seat, and then hence the courts will just drive right along with her entire agenda.
No question about it. You're exactly right. In terms of Marxist care, the advantage to Marxist care, hopefully, is that there will be a few people that are able to look back and not have to ponder what it will be, because we can see what a disaster it's been. Obviously, President Obama was not going to pull back. He thinks he's on the correct path. And Miles, to your point, Hillary's doubling down on it, and she's doing it. By the way, I think she recognizes it's wrong, but she's doing it for political grace and no other purpose whatsoever. Whereas he's an ideologue. So
I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal, January 2013, explaining, and this had been essentially a year before the law, the health insurance exchanges and so forth went into effect, saying that what will happen is in a number of states you'll see premiums in those exchanges move up by 50% and even double within the first few years. The Secretary of Health and Human Services at the time, Kathleen Sebelius, came out shortly thereafter and said, no, this is going to work well. We're going to see prices decline. And of course, we turned out to be, unfortunately, absolutely right in that. And the administration has continued to sort of say, what problem with Obamacare? Until last week, he invited in some of the insurance company executives, trying to beg them to not worry about the hundreds of millions of dollars they're losing selling health insurance on the exchanges, and trying to keep them in the exchanges, because we're down to about a third of the country only having one health insurance option in their exchange.
Right.
You know, as a deplorable, Skittle-eating Trump-publican, I'd like to hear your views on the Keystone Pipeline and coal and fracking.
The Keystone Pipeline is, again, one of the places where the administration was just this is what's so amazing. The Keystone Pipeline, the Keystone XL, was the fourth phase in a four-phase project. The Keystone Pipeline has actually been up and running since 2010. It goes across some Canadian provinces, goes down through North Dakota of all places, South Dakota, into Nebraska, and then over into Missouri, where they're Illinois, where they're doing the refining. They actually had phase 2, which went from Nebraska down to Cushing, Oklahoma, and then President Obama went out for phase 3 of the Keystone Pipeline in Cushing, Oklahoma, coming down to Texas, where I am, and actually sort of did a grand opening on that a few years ago. It's the Keystone XL, which was just going to add one more pipeline, taking a little bit different route and connecting up with the existing Keystone XL. Nobody ever complained about the Keystone Pipeline until the XL came up, and yet we've been doing that now for 4 or 5 years with no problems.
So what caused the uproar?
I think environmentalists feeling like they had a chance to be able to fight this. This is the bizarre thing, Mike. The Keystone Pipeline has been up and running from the exact same place, Alberta, Canada, carrying the exact same oil they complained about, that was going to be this heavy crude. It's been doing that now for 5 or 6 years, and there's been I think there was a little leak a year or so ago, but there's been no essential problems. The Keystone XL was just going to add one more part to that, and interestingly, the Keystone XL was going to come through Montana, pick up some of that Bakken oil, and bring that down to refining. And the North Dakota pipeline that they're talking about right now is also picking up the Bakken because they couldn't get the Keystone XL through.
Listen, before we run out of time, Merrill, Miles had a couple other things, and I'm interested. I'm with him on that. One of them was fracking. What's your view on fracking?
Well, I think fracking is what's created the boom that we have right now. There's some concern that the injection wells that you take the water out from fracking and put them in other places has created some earthquakes. There's no hard evidence, but there's certainly circumstantial evidence. And so some places, including Oklahoma, are cutting back on that as they try to figure out how to resolve that problem.
Yeah, by the way, Mike, that's kind of the dirty little secret behind Kasich's miracle in Ohio is that they ran into a bunch of energy boom, and that allowed Kasich to kind of bail that state out.
Right. I think that...
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There was a piece in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago where there were so many jobs in Ohio that were paying more than $100,000 a year for people who were working, blue-collar workers on the pipelines, and not the pipelines, but on the in the energy fields.
Right. The studies I've seen, at least on the pipeline, suggest that in terms of environmental impact, that the pipeline itself is vastly safer and better for the environment than bring it down by train or truck. And so when you stand back and look at the arguments, they just, as almost always is the case, they just pale in the face of facts.
That's absolutely right. The pipelines are considered roughly 80 times safer than shipping things on truck, and then of course trains have their own problem with moving the stuff. Trains are a little more flexible. You can go more places, but they also have their own problems. So the pipelines are the safest way to go. It's infrastructure, and there are some aging pipelines out there, but that's why you want to let companies build new pipelines to be able to replace the old ones.
No question. Listen, last question, Merrill. When you look forward 5 years, what do you have you got a prediction for our energy costs 5 years from now?
If we have a president who allows us to go ahead and continue to develop that, I think we will see energy costs low and widespread, and we might very well be able to use energy as a way to counter the things that Russia, Iran, and others are trying to use, because they use energy policy as a hammer to make countries do what they want to do. Those countries need an option, and we could provide that option.
Let me put you on the spot, and then we're out of time. You're going to be voting for Trump or for Hillary?
I cannot. Trump will be a hard vote for me, but I cannot vote for the liar who ought to be in jail, and that would be Hillary.
Listen, Merrill Matthews, thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. And as we go forward, we're going to reach back out to you and get you back on.
Thank you, sir.
All right, folks. Merrill Matthews, thank you. And, folks, we'll be right back after some messages.
You're listening to the Mike Hewitt Talk.
RenegadeRiver.com is new and used firearms, all priced to sell, plus ammo, reloading supplies, optics, clothing, lasers, and yes, tactical gear. RenegadeRiver.com, family owned right here in Michigan, because you deserve it. And the Mike Hewitt Show is brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com, already into segment 2.
Hey, folks, if you're just tuning in, we've got Ludwig von Wiedem-Dorsky and Miles Bauer on deck with me. And before we jump into the topic, let me pause to do a couple little homework assignments here we've got to do. First is tell me about that Sweet Connection place.
Caramel apples, candy, other types of sweets, caramel corn.
And that belongs to whom?
My mom, wife, and sister.
Well, let me focus on your wife for a momento, if I might.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Listen, for her birthday today, happy birthday, Gina. For her birthday today, why don't you give her a day of peace and just not go home for a while?
I thought about it.
I mean, that would be the best thing. You could just give her a little time away. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I figured drop the kids off for her to watch. And I just won't be there. That'd be worth it, right? I'll just go to the casino or, the hockey rink or something.
What a knuckle-dragging, all of the things that go with that.
That's selfless act. I'm giving her time away from me.
That's kind of, sort of. Yeah, but things to remind her of you probably don't help. I'm just saying. Listen, on another note before I jump right in, so we've got Sweet Connections.
Yes.
That's located where?
Byron Center Road, right off of M6 across from Metro Health. And Gina will be getting a gift basket from there because we do those for birthdays.
You're going to get her a gift basket from her own company?
Yeah.
Oh, what a pig you are. I'm just saying. And that's at sweet-connections.com, right?
Yes.
Nice.
Hey, listen, I got a whole thing
you
planned
hear
for
Miles
tonight.
laughing at you?
Yeah. He's like, what do these kids become?
Now, listen, on a different note, let me shift gears before I run out of time on this little public address thing. I've got my second oldest daughter, who tomorrow will turn 35.
Man, you're old. That's my age.
And I'm
And that's
listening.
your second oldest?
Listen, you hear Miles in the background going, wow, Miles, think about that. That's a lifetime ago.
Oh my God, I can't even believe that.
35. And then the oldest daughter, Melissa, next month will turn 36. I got a daughters heading towards 40. I'm going, oh my goodness gracious.
So did your AARP card come in the mail?
I sent it back.
Did you?
No, I'm trying to cut down on my Marxist care. I'm just telling you.
He's not cutting down on the senior coffee.
All jokes aside, I got him on the phone and say, stop mailing me that trash. I don't want it at my home.
Yeah, I
hate that company.
I get angry every time I get one of those AARP mailings.
So, all right, now I got that out of my system. I hate them. I just do. I'm sorry. And that has nothing to do with my age. I don't like Marxism. And the fact that they try to use our capitalist system to better themselves by advocating Marxism, they can go somewhere. So, T-minus 47 days is what I'm saying. How you feeling about the race, Mr. Trump-publican?
Hey, I'm feeling pretty good, I got to tell you. And maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I'm seeing blue states getting a little redder. So, there are some states that have been blue for quite a while, and now they're starting to lean red. And, so I'm getting a slight bit happier.
Yeah, I'm still nervous, but I'm starting to feel better, and it's the two thing going on here. Donald Trump is doing vastly better over the last month on the trail. He genuinely is doing good. He looks and sounds presidential. He's saying reasonable things. And meanwhile, as we talked about last week and the week before, the Hildebeest, the wheels are falling off of her cart. I mean, we watched the bombing comments that she made the other day. Did you watch that, Miles? Where she's aboard her campaign airplane. And listen, I'm not a doctor, but to watch that interview, if anyone was being honest and just watching it. In fact, I rewatched it to make sure I wasn't lying to myself. She looked absolutely doped up, like there was something, like the cogs weren't grabbing in.
Well, if you listen to her talk, she never says a complete sentence. It's like 2 or 3 words. It's either she's thinking people are really dumb and don't get what she's saying, she's either lying, or she can't think fast enough. It might be a combination of all.
But listen, I've seen her on the trail, and I don't like what she says, but I've seen her on the trail recently where she sounds relative. I don't understand her eyes wavering all over the place, but aside from that, she sounds reasonable. I don't agree with it, but I get it. But when I watched her at that 3 o'clock, it's the joke, by the way. It's a sick, sad joke. But that, to me, was an example of who we're going to get to answer the phone at 3 a.m. to use her words.
If she's there, because she didn't answer it.
I think she said put them on hold.
Yeah.
Just put them on hold.
She told Uma to put them on hold.
Yeah, Uma.
Yeah.
Who told her husband, stop that.
Yeah.
Leave our children alone. Did I say that?
The other thing, though, that I think is going to be key here is enthusiasm. And it continues to be. It started in the primaries, and it's continuing through the general. The Trump-publicans, like yours truly, are way more enthusiastic than what we're seeing coming out to see Hilly.
The fun part, and I don't take this direction often anymore on the air, but I went to a big dinner the other evening, watched Carly Fiorina give a great talk, I might add. It really was. And if it were an off-election year, I would have applauded. But and listen, I don't mind her. I'm not against her. I didn't want her as a president. I didn't support her in the primary, but I like her. My understanding is that she's unofficially running for the RNC chair position.
Wait a minute, Mike.
Yes, sir.
She was Cruz's Veep.
I know it. Well, she was Cruz's Veep for a week, and listen, I was a cruiser, as everyone aware, but I think that was extremely poor judgment on his part, and it was me walking away from him, at least in part. And I know I'm going to get people angry with me right now because a lot of people like Carly, but here's the problem I have: we were inside the 50-day window for probably what everyone tells me and I agree with, the most significant presidential election we've had in modern history. And the guest of honor, the special guest at this dinner, never said it was a Republican dinner. A Republican dinner within the 50-day window never said his name. And listen, I'm not beating up on her right now, and I'm not beating up that dinner. It was a wonderful time. I really did have a lot of good friends I've known for years. I enjoyed it. I walked away very positive. But my statement, in fact, I put it on Facebook. Hello, Republican Party. Our nominee's name is Donald J. Trump. And I'm telling you, I believe he's going to win, and history will unwind and show me I'm right or wrong. I predicted it when I was a cruiser. I predicted it in our show at the end of the year last year. I believed then, and I believe now he's going to win. And if I'm right, there's going to be a lot of, not party leadership, but elected leaders on the Republican side that are going to look awful stupid. I don't know how else to say it. But if you're not on board, forget him for a moment. But if you're not standing with the millions of people that identify themselves as Republican, man, I just don't know it. I get the folks that are wrestling with it. We've talked about them on the air. Some folks have some libertarian leanings, although Gary Johnson's not a libertarian. That's a separate issue. I get folks that don't like. I understand it. And in fact, by the way, just a little inset, I will fight for a person's right to support whoever it is that they want, including Hillary supporters, by the way. I don't agree with it, but I would passionately fight for your right, because I think that's what America is founded in.
If your friend's house was on fire, would you pour gasoline on it or get water?
Well,
you just had an argument.
Listen, they don't. I get your point, but I don't think that some of these folks like Carly. I know why she wouldn't want to say his name. I understand it.
Well, she did come out She did come out and say you have to vote for him.
She said, "I would rather a president." We can't. I think the words were pretty close.
Yeah.
We cannot have a President Clinton.
Yeah.
We must have a President Trump.
Yeah.
But look,
you know what, though, Mike?
Yeah.
The thing I struggle with, and maybe this is my lack of character. I don't know. I will fall on my sword. But you know what? This has been decided since July, since the RNC. We're now in late September. If you are sitting here telling me in my face that you're still struggling to get on the Trump train,
Yep.
I'm not. I am no longer buying it. I'm looking at a person who's just trying to find a reason why they're not on it.
Here's the problem. You and I talked about that last week, and I agree with you, because it's just math. You're going to have a President Hillary Clinton or a President Donald Trump. And you heard all the hoopla about whether George Bush Sr. was going to be voting for Hillary or not. I don't believe the Kennedy woman that said that, by the way. I don't believe it. But
I'm with you on that.
I just don't believe her. I really don't. Now, on the other hand, I could see in a setting, because the Bush family doesn't like him. It's a personal thing. It's not political. Right. It's not party. It's a personal thing, and I get it, and it's okay with me. So I could see sitting around with 8 or 9 political people that all know each other. I could see making a joke or an offhanded quip, and then having her run around like a little Marxist with excitement that they got a new follower. I could see where she'd take a comment out of hand. But in terms of putting him on the truth machine and say, who are you going to vote for, and I don't know, by the way. I have no clue. Nobody knows but him. But if you put me on the truth machine, my guess is he would either vote for Donald Trump or pass on voting.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. Now, this guy's a guy that spent his entire life marching towards achieving a handful of goals, of which Hillary, now, by the way, there are some folks right now that are disagreeing. There's a lot of folks that think those two are bookends. I don't think that. There are similarities politically, but there's enough differences to say I don't see him embracing her ideologically. I don't. Maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid too.
I think you would vote for her.
You think so?
Mm-hmm. Because Trump is everything that they do not stand for.
Small government?
Small government. A guy from the outside taking over their realm, their world.
You think about this, though. Here's one for you. Miles will like this, though. You get a lot of those folks that we talked about it in 2010 and coming forward, where they'd come out and they're running for office, whether it's state or federal, and they are just throwing out the red meat. We're talking about Jeffersonianism and limited government and constitutions and all the things that we love on this show, okay? And then they got elected, and they're going, holy moly, the people took us serious. They actually wanted us to do that stuff. What a problem. And that's really... Go ahead, Miles.
So the one thing to Matt's point, and remember Rush has also made this case that the establishment people will stick with the establishment people, right? So that would be the only argument that I've heard as to the reason why Bush would back Hillary is because Hillary's the establishment candidate.
See, in that position or in that particular argument, I do the status quo word rather than an establishment word. Maybe they mean the same thing. I don't know. We've debated that over the months about what the word establishment means. I interpret establishment as meaning a check writer, and the status quo people are the ones that receive the checks. Hillary's very good at receiving the checks. I saw a percentage the other day, not to go too far off, but it was like 5.7% of the money that go to the Clinton with a K Foundation actually goes towards the charities, and the difference goes to expenses. They got a lot of expenses.
Listen, I see Trump like this. In every industry, there's somebody who comes from the outside, turns things upside down, and people will not support that person no matter what. Alan Mulally with Ford came from the airplane industry. They hated him. What did he do? He took Ford from about $1.50 to over $15 a share.
Listen,
right now, Tim Tebow switched from football to baseball, and people hate it.
At the time, I was running a Ford dealership, and us folks on the dealership level loved him.
Exactly.
Because he reinvented and reinvigorated Ford Motor Company. Yeah. And he brought it back from the Dust Bowl and made it a viable, profitable, functioning company with good products.
He's the Lee Iacocca of our time in the auto industry.
Oh, I couldn't stand Lee Iacocca.
He brought Chrysler back from the dead.
The government.
Then he left, and then they fell.
Yeah, he's the government, Yeah.
He took $1 a year.
Yeah.
Lee Iacocca, $1 a year.
Do you think that's what he got out of it?
No. He said, pay me $1 a year.
Do you think that
I want stock options?
There you go.
But you know what?
Yeah, okay.
That's the way CEO should be.
He got do-re-mi.
He said, let me get paid on my performance.
Oh, yeah. What do you think, Miles?
That's a leader.
I would just point out one thing. Let's remember when Bush was running against Reagan, remember it was Bush who authored the term voodoo economics.
Yep. That's that capitalism. That's what voodoo economics is. Capitalism.
So I got something for you guys.
Bush does not have a proud past when you think about the campaign of 1980.
No, but I've always said the Republican Party represents, of course, a lot of little splinters, but three main legs of the chair. And Bush, the Rockefeller Republican, or whatever you want to refer to it as, that's the slice of the GOP that the Democrats in the 30s used to show as the big fat cat banker with a big wad of cash and looked like the money guy from the Monopoly. Listen, we're running over, so we're going to have to go to a break, and then when we come back, we're going to kick the can around inside the Enigma vacuum. Folks, we'll be right back.
This is the Mike Hewitt Show on News.
RenegadeRiver.com is new and used firearms, all priced to sell, plus ammo, reloading supplies, optics, clothing, lasers, and yes, tactical gear. RenegadeRiver.com, family owned right here in Michigan, because you deserve it.
3, 2, 1, 0.
You have arrived to your final destination on your journey through reality. Welcome to the Enigma Report.
Folks, here's what's an enigma to me. We're watching a debate go back and forth about violence in the United States, what I call terrorism. Miles, what do you call it?
It's a gun control problem or a workplace violence issue, apparently.
It's a fascinating thing to me because the two debates that we're having between the two main, the Republican and the Democratic nominee, one of the most significant debates of this election cycle is terrorism versus workplace violence, et cetera, et cetera. Hillary Clinton is espousing that not only are the policies currently in place fine, but she's pushing for more, way more of what we've seen already is. Folks, while we were going through the two different breaks, I was all over the internet looking for a list of terrorism attacks that's happened over the last 6 or 8 years. The list is huge. And that doesn't even measure, to one of our listeners, Kathy's point down in Chicago, that doesn't even measure the numbers of terrorist attacks that were prevented. Folks, it's endless because of the way they report it. No one's actually making a checklist. I found one. It's significant. This is only related to within the borders of the United States. There are several in 2004, several in 2005, 2014, 2015, 2013. It's mind-boggling, and yet each time we have this, the debate isn't about how to stop it. And by the way, the way to stop it is to do exactly what Donald Trump is saying, and that is know who you're allowing into the United States. I'll be jeebers if I understand why that's such a difficult concept to understand. You know, instead of the current vetting system, are you a terrorist? No. Do you have any family members or any relationship with a terrorist organization? No. Okay, come on in and here's your check. And you go, wait a minute. That's folks, the system's off the rails. So we're watching this, and I think a lot of people, maybe even me, get to the point where you're a little bit numb over it. There's a big, gigantic civil unrest going on. Yeah, go ahead, Miles.
Mike, are you a xenophobe?
I am so deplorable. It's absolutely amazing.
Do you eat Skittles?
It's a profound election cycle. When we're having that as it's amazing to me.
Listen, yesterday, Clinton came out and said she wants tough vetting or hard vetting.
She wants 100,000 Syrian refugees in addition to what we have. And listen, they can't. There's no way to vet them.
But she's out there bashing Trump for saying it was extreme vetting.
Okay, but
she goes, "I want hard vetting."
But listen, there's no extreme or hard.
She's lying.
She is lying. She's lying like a floor mat.
Yeah.
But there's no way to vet them. No. It isn't like having somebody come here from another state where you can draw a lien search on them. You can draw a credit bureau. You can't. There's no functioning government. You can't say to the Syrian government, "Tell me about Jim Bob." We don't have any records on Jim Bob. Oh, come on in anyhow. What the heck? You've been vetted. What?
Yeah.
Follow the money, folks. This is about money and power. It has nothing to do with helping anybody. It's about money and power. They're getting money from an international organization on a per-head basis, and in the meantime, they're hoping to turn these folks into Democratic voters. This is no mystery, and it has nothing to do with saving anybody. And meanwhile, we've got many, many domestic terrorist attacks every single year. The numbers are going up. I'm sorry, the numbers are going up, not down, not plateaued. They are going up. And this nitwit wants to do more of that, but increase it. Miles, there's something wrong with an electorate that says half of us are going to vote for that because it makes sense. It doesn't make any sense.
No, I completely agree, and I'm not entirely convinced yet, though, that half the electorate's going there.
What do you think the numbers will be? Got a guess? Do you got a gut?
I mean, we've both seen articles where Trump's doing better with Hispanics than Romney did.
Yep.
We've both seen articles where Trump's making inroads into the African Americans. I mean, look, I think this is. I don't think the media wants us to see this, but I think that there are signs. And again, I'll plead guilty to being a Kool-Aid drinker, but I do think something is happening. I'm not saying people will necessarily come out and vote for Trump, but I don't know that there's any type of enthusiasm for Hillary and those policies like the media wants us to actually believe.
There was some 1,800 folks within the United States, not citizens, by the way, that were on they were supposed to be deported. They were considered a risk and were supposed to be deported. Guess what happened, folks? Oh, gosh, you can't guess. It's a mind-numbing. They accidentally went ahead and gave them citizenship instead of deporting them. This is the government that Hillary says can vet somebody. They accidentally gave more than 1,800 people, instead of deportation, they gave them citizenship. Talk about a smack your head moment. Who are these people that think that we should have more of that kind of government? I don't understand that. I don't understand President Obama. I most certainly don't understand Hillary Clinton, other than what I said. She's in pursuit of money, and she's in pursuit of power, and nothing else matters. She gets an endless list every day that shows the number of terrorist attacks that, folks, you and I are not seeing because the media is not reporting them. It all becomes a big blur. She sees them every day and is still calling for 100,000 Syrian refugees. What is Trump calling for? He's calling for extreme vetting. It's that same extreme vetting we had from the Civil War through 1991 when they started calling for you don't need IDs to vote. Well, these things all add up, folks. These are not separate issues, and it's an enigma to me.
We stopped all Japanese immigrants during World War II, even rounded up what we suspected as possible interior enemies.
But 99.999% of those were good people.
Yes, and
I don't endorse that.
No.
But I do say that if you found 1,800 people that should be deported because they're a risk to the United States who are not citizens, deport them. Don't make them citizens. And if you're Hillary Clinton and you're running for president and you really care about the United States of America and the people therein, you'd point to this and say, we can't have any more of that. Not, we need more of it.
Oh, she's flaunting it.
It's a crazy thing.
And people are...
It's a crazy thing.
Bring them on.
Crazy.
We're great Christians. Bring them in.
But it's about power and money. Truman, great Democrat. He said you're only a criminal gets rich in politics. No, he said a crook.
Yeah.
Well, crooked Hillary. Only, his words, by the way, not Trump's. Only a crook gets rich in politics. She's grossly rich.
How do you become a millionaire?
Rich in politics.
How do you become a millionaire in 6 years when you only make $173,000 a year as a senator?
Give me some dough.
All right.
I'll get that done for you. Give me some dough.
All right.
You know who said that? You know who woke us up to it? Trump.
Yeah.
Why do you think I gave him money? I needed favors.
Yeah.
Give him some dough.
Hillary's at my wedding because she had to be.
Yeah.
Not because I necessarily wanted her. She had to be.
I don't get it, Miles. Honest to goodness, I don't get it, buddy. When you sit and watch these things and you've got, and by the way, I do agree with you, half of America doesn't, but there's a large swath of those who will vote that A, don't know, or B, don't think that is as significant as it is, or then C, will say, yeah, you're probably right, but I don't care because I like the rest of her policies, so I'm going to click the button for her name.
I do want to tell you, everybody, that, because obviously I'm at university, I'm teaching, and all we hear about is how liberal the students are at university. That's all we ever hear and see. I want to say that's not always true. There's a lot of closet conservatives that feel liberated when they find out they can even speak or address their view that way. You know, we were talking about some things in an economics class, and I was going through some tax stuff, and one of the girls said, well, that's not worth it for Trump. And after the class, I said, hey, thanks for your opinion. And she was shocked, because obviously she wasn't for him. I'm like, thank you. I'm glad you spoke up. I'm glad I felt that you were able to speak up, even though you were opposing what we were talking about. But there was a lot of people who, in the college university level, that are going to be out there for Trump that we're not seeing. I'm back to the closet thing. People are in the closet for him. We don't know it.
Miles, we hear a lot about how the internet is being used from the Middle East to incite some of these folks. And I'm not the computer guy in the family you are. When I listen to this, I think to myself, and I'm probably wrong here, but I think, doesn't the United States, aren't we still in control of the internet? I know that Premier Obama wants to give the control to the world, but at least temporarily right now, we're still in control. Is that true?
Well, relatively speaking, right? I mean, I read this morning Facebook is starting to suspend accounts where people are putting deplorable in their name.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've talked to people that were blocked using the word deplorable.
Yeah.
So much for the First Amendment when we only had to protect ourselves from the government.
And then I've completely given up on Google News because you can. I mean, if you want an example of where there is bias, do Google News and then do any other type of news outlet on the internet, and you can see where Google is screening to a particular side. So, so there's not overt government control like there is in China, but there is specific forms of control of the internet that we have unless we are savvy.
Google's funded by the government. They're basically, if you actually got into it,
they're a government
company.
They're a government arm. But where I was going with this is it seems like as the United States, what's in the best interest of the United States is not to silence the folks that we disagree with here in the United States, because that's not what we're founded on. Yeah. But it would seem like we could turn the switch off for those areas in Syria, as an example, that are causing civil unrest here. Just turn them so they're done communicating to the United States.
They can fine you for putting deplorable, but they can't turn off an account that says we want lone wolf attacks.
They're fanning the flames on in the same structure that say deplorable is a bad word. Yeah. There was a good one when Hillary used it. 45 seconds. He's got the notes going, folks. Last point, Miles. What were we going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, even if you turned off Syria, they would just go to somewhere else and continue to put the same hate on the internet. So you can't really turn off the faucet.
Kathy's talking about Syrian refugee children. Listen, folks, I want the Syrian refugee children taken care of in safe zones there in Syria. Folks, we're out of time. Find us on Twitter at Talk Mike Hewitt and on Facebook / The Mike Hewitt Show. Talk to you next Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.